For more, I'm joined now by Tennessee Congressman and House Oversight Committee member Tim Burchett. Congressman, thanks for joining us. The administration has a choice here. It can attempt to deport Abrego Garcia or let him go through on that federal trial down in Tennessee where you are right now. Do you think they'll let that federal trial move forward?
I don't know. I get a little concerned, though, when we deport these people just over the border, and then under the Biden administration, we saw them just come right back over and commit crimes. I would like to, I'd like to slap their hand a little bit, put them in make them do a little time, and then send them on to Uganda or wherever they're going to send them, because I think that sends a clear message. This guy's a gangbanger. Everybody knows it. You've got these liberal judges and very liberal attorneys who think their rights are being violated and not worry about the Americans who've lost their lives because some of these dirtbags, their rights. What about our rights?
Yeah, the president is also suggesting that the National Guard could end up in cities like Chicago. Do you think that that's a good use of the National Guard and the president should do that?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think you're looking at Chicago. I mean, it's a crime-ridden town. And then they get on the news and the national media makes it up some civil rights thing. What about the civil rights of those poor folks that are there? You know, in Washington, D.C., we had a hearing. Chairman Comer had Washington, D.C. come in and talk about their crime, and they told us there wasn't any crime. And oddly enough, at that very time, there was a carjacking, a kid in a Jeep in broad daylight. And there were 6 white people explaining to us there was no crime. Again, you've got these white liberals, and the poor black folks were sitting in the crowd and just shaking their head. And I said, why are there only white people up here speaking? Where are the folks from the neighborhoods? And they were in the back agreeing with what I was saying. I would say time and time again, if you would interview some of the people in these communities, the actual people who live there, not these suburban white liberals who bust in in righteous indignation, you would see a different spin on what is actually going on in these communities. Yeah, and they would support President Trump.
In Lucas's report from the White House, he mentioned that Senator Schmidt says, hey, you can bring them to my state. A number of Democrats have pointed out that there are high crime cities in Republican states, too. Would you support that same use of the National Guard in a city like Memphis, let's say?
Memphis, Tennessee, it's a murder capital. Absolutely. You've got a real problem there. And Schmidt's a great guy. I love him. Pretty mediocre baseball player, but a pretty good guy. But no, he is exactly right. And I think Memphis, Tennessee is a perfect example. And the liberals will say, oh, it's a red state. Well, it's a blue controlled town. That has been controlled by machine Democrat politics for generations. I grew up in Tennessee. I was in the legislature for 16 years. I've visited Memphis. Brother, I'll never go back. It is a crime-ridden area, and they can complain and gripe all they want to, but the poor people there, as I was told by an FBI agent one time, some of the best people in the world live in our inner cities, but they're held hostage by some of the worst. And that's exactly what you're saying. It's big machine politics. It's just about control, and it's about staying in power. It has nothing to do with taking care of the poor folks that are victims to crime. These moms that come on, and it's just the heartbreaking stories of their kids being murdered. Go to Washington, D.C., walk downtown before Trump, and you would have seen boarded up towns, boarded up businesses. You don't have drugstores. You don't have food. You can't go because the thugs control it, and businesses are pulling out, and rightfully so.
You know, over back here in D.C., you've had this ongoing investigation on your committee, the House Oversight Committee, into the R-Tenn and the Biden administration. A number of press staff have come up. Chairman Comer said that he's considering possibly issuing a subpoena for former Vice President Kamala Harris. Do you think that she should appear before the committee? And if not, do you think that you guys should send a subpoena?
Absolutely. Chairman Comer is correct, as always. He is very forthright and very judicious in his approach to this, but he is correct. I doubt she would come. The Democrats are hiding. They throw the rock. They're like those kids that throw a rock over the fence and run home and hide behind their mama's skirt. That's exactly what they do every dadgum time. They are gutless, and they need to be called out. And we need to start enforcing the law, brother. That's the main thing. That's what America is mad about right now. We can have all these crazy study committees we want, but until we start enforcing the law, which Chairman Comer is attempting to do, I think you'll keep seeing this kind of activity and this kind of moral depravity that you've seen in the Democrat Party that is that is running their party right now.
Yeah, and the committee also now has a bunch of Epstein docs from the Justice Department. Have you gotten any word as to what's in them or what we can expect to see?
And I have not. I have not. Of course, I was the one that urged the chairman in the committee to move forward the subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell. I think we need to get to the bottom of it. And I think President Trump wants to get to the bottom of it. And you know good and well, if Trump was on any of those files, anything that was bad and negative towards him, the Biden administration would have put it out. They had it for 4 years. Trump knew this guy, and he said he was a dirtbag. He banned him from Mar-a-Lago over 15 years ago before he was suicided. So I just think this thing is a bad situation. And I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it, because I don't trust the Biden administration, because they had those files for 4 years. I don't know what they've removed or doctored or changed. I don't trust them as far as I could throw the dome off the Capitol, brother. And dadgummit, we need to get to the bottom of it. That's why people, when you delay these things, it just allows the corruption to creep in. And I think that's what has happened now. And Trump's correct. He doesn't want innocent people to be harmed in this. There's 1,000 girls at least that were raped.
Yeah.
And some of them are gone now. Some of them probably have taken their own lives. So I think we should have gotten to it a long time ago, and I put that off on Biden. Okay. And shame on the national media for making any other thing. They made a spectacle out of this thing.
Republican Congressman from Tennessee, Tim Burchett, House Oversight Committee, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, brother.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.